Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103.9 as we get back to it on this Monday. As we get through, seems like everybody just talked about storms. I thought it was kind of funny. Again, I talked on Friday about the sensationalism of weather and how like every single storm seems to be the storm of the century, according to the news. Again, not to take away from dangers, but it just gets so sensationalized, and it was just kind of funny. Um, they interviewed on that CBS on top of the hour. The CBS interviewed that guy. It's like, oh, let's hear him talk about the storms, and he's like, yeah, I had trees fall down and a tree fell on the fence. It's like that's the best person you could find to interview in the time. Like some guy who had a tree fall on his fence. And you're supposed to be this national news service. That's the best one you could get. Not the best. I mean, there were actual tornadoes going through. Um, but the guy you got to interview was one who had a tree fall on his fence. Like, okay, calm down just a little bit here. But anyway, I just always find it funny because at least it always seems like it's the next storm of the century, and then at least here, again, storm just kind of passed through, and it's just that sensationalism has just gotten just crazy. Again, weather has to make a lot of like the Weather Channel. They are not a not-for-profit organization. They are a for-profit place. Just like most of the other news agencies out there, most news agencies are in fact for profit, which means we have to sell advertising. And so, what's better to sell advertising than sensationalizing every single thing that comes in? Everything's a drama story. Everything's the biggest story ever. But it's just that's how they make their money. But what we do cover here on this show, on the full story, is we do cover the big stories, and we have a lot of them. This is going to seem to be a busy week. So Donald Trump announced that he will be talking with Vladimir Putin this week on ending the war in Ukraine. So what we're going to do, we're going to play that clip for you when he was on Air Force One, when he told reporters that, and the Kremlin has since confirmed that talk is going to happen, just going to be over the phone. But we'll talk about what that can mean and how that is a major step that we have yet to have seen from any military or from any of the world leaders. Because up until this point, all other world leaders have just shunned Russia. Which again, I get it. You want to they're big bad Russia, whatever you want to say, but you can't really get to peace with someone if you don't talk to them. That's kind of the point. You got to talk to each other to try to find an end to something. You just can't be like a spoiled child and say, "I ain't talking to you. I ain't looking at you." Right? You can't do that. That's not how diplomacy works. And despite what they may think, so that conversation is going to happen. We're going to talk again. We're going to play that video for you. He announced that on Air Force One, as well as what is kind of analyzing what that's going to mean. Additionally, we're going to talk about Trump's policy of deporting people down to Venezuela, and there's been a kind of a fight between him and the courts, where the court has ordered he couldn't do it, and then they did do it. There's some back and forth of the facts on when the judge's orders came down. We're going to cover the facts of that story, again, the full story of the facts going on there, as well as the law that the Trump administration is using to say how they can deport how they can put these people in different prisons, and whether they need to use that law or not, or can they use other laws if that one fails, because there's something they can have a backup for. Again, these are dangerous criminals that they are deporting down to Venezuela, literally drug cartel members, and so I think the judge is not going to be finding himself in the good graces of people by trying to defend and trying to keep drug cartel members who are not citizens in the United States. I don't think he's going to get too many. I don't think he's going to get too many people that are going to support that, especially when the executive who has been elected by the populace has said that's what's going to be. And so we're going to talk, like I said, exactly what the facts are as far as that goes. What was going on Uh, so, like I said, a lot of good things to talk about today. Is it's a pretty big week as we go into it. Um, it's like I said, it's just another time with weeks of Trump shaking things up. So that's what we're gonna get to. So we're gonna go ahead and take our first break right here, and we'll get right into those things. As always, you want to call in number 601-879-0002. We are also streaming live on Rumble and YouTube. You can make comments on there as well, and we can have conversations during the break. It's always fun. So keep it tuned right here to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103.9. And the first story I want to talk about today is Donald Trump saying that he will be talking with Vladimir Putin this week as far as how to end the war in Ukraine. Now, again, this is a pretty major move since the prior administration just straight up refused to ever even talk to anybody from Russia, as well as anybody from Europe has just refused to talk to Vladimir Putin. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's hard to end a war if you don't talk, right? And everybody should be focusing on ending war, not continuing it for indefinitely, which has essentially been the plan for everybody until Donald Trump got in. Donald Trump ran on the promise that he was going to end the war in Ukraine. And to his credit, right, whether you like it or not, to his credit, he has worked tirelessly for that. With Marco Rubio, of course, going to Saudi Arabia to talk with Russia, also engaging in conversations with Vladimir Zelensky on getting mineral rights deals in Ukraine. So the United States has a stake in Ukraine, which would then strengthen Ukraine's position for peace in Russia. So he has been trying to move the pieces. It is, and again, we're only in halfway through March. Remember, he's only been president since January 20th. I mean, right now we're just shy of 2 months, right? And he's already been moving all of these pieces. Not to mention all the other stuff that's been going on with Doge and all this other stuff that's just been moving in that direction. He has been quite making the moves, to say to for lack of a better word. So anyway, he made this announcement on Air Force One, and so we go ahead and play that for you guys. That him there on Air Force One, and if you're seeing the live stream, you can see the video as well. And apologies again, this is on Air Force One, so you're going to be hearing like the background noise of jets. But we'll go over what he talks about in case you have a hard time hearing exactly what he says.
We learned a lot. We're doing pretty well, I think, with Russia. And we'll see if we have something to announce maybe by Tuesday. I'll be speaking to President Putin on Tuesday. And a lot of work's been done over the weekend. We want to see if we can bring that war to an end. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I think we have a very good chance.
What sort of concessions will you be seeking to have Putin make to get a deal done?
Well, I think we'll, be talking about land. It's a lot of land. It's a lot different than it was before the war, as you know. And we'll be talking about land. We'll be talking about power plants. That's up, that's a big question. But I think we have a lot of it already discussed very much by both sides.
You'll ask him.
Ukraine and Russia.
You'll ask him.
We're already talking about that, dividing up certain assets. Yeah, and they've been working on that.
Okay, so again, sorry for the you hear that background noise of the jet, but it is what it is. That happens when you make when you have interviews on a jet. But so like I said, so him confirming he would be talking to Putin comes hours after U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, who we've talked about him quite a bit on the show, as he's been one of the key movers in the talks with Ukraine and Russia. He said on CNN State of the Union that the conversation would likely take place this week, and you hear Donald Trump right there in that clip saying, he will be talking to him tomorrow, and he will have some kind of answers tomorrow. He said Tuesday. Witkoff said he had positive and solution-based discussion with Putin in Moscow last week, a few days after American and Ukrainian officials agreed to a potential ceasefire with Russia, which we talked about. So their meeting on Thursday, that was last Thursday, marked the second time the two have met in the past month. And again, this is just coming up as more and more of these meetings have just been happening, right? A lot in Saudi Arabia with both sides. Now, Ukraine and Russia has not met directly, but you said the United States has been talking to both of them. And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov on Monday confirmed Monday morning, that's today, confirmed the plans for the two leaders to speak on Tuesday, but did not say what the conversation was about, saying that we never get ahead of events in the context of conversations between two presidents are not subject to any prior discussion. So again, and I wouldn't expect them to exactly say what that was going to be. But he said, Donald Trump in that clip there, again, if you couldn't hear, he said a lot's work's been done over the weekend. We want to see if we can bring that war to an end. And they asked him what the conversation would be about on Trump's side. He said, we'll be talking about land and we'll be talking about power plants. And what he's talking about there is that, so a key part of Russia's offensive in Ukraine in multiple ways, in both conventional warfare and cyber warfare, has been attacking their energy infrastructure, their power plants, right? That's where a lot of their bombing's been happening, essentially to turn the city, to black out the whole country. And they've been doing it, like I said, both in conventional warfare with bombs literally hitting those power plants, as well as cyber warfare, where they've been able to hack into the systems of these power plants to shut them down. And ultimately, right, there's one thing America can gain from this war is I hope that our military is paying attention on how this war was fought, because it's starting to give indications of what a modern warfare starts to look at, right? What's the mixture of it, right? You have a mixture of conventional warfare, guns, bullets, right? Literally, the hard hand-to-hand combat, all that stuff still happening, right? But you mix it in with a lot of drones, a lot of surveillance technology, as well as cyber warfare, which again, Donald Trump was very, very early on when he was in his first presidency, when he created the Army's Future Command, which is all about cyber warfare and those types of next generation types of battlefields. Battlefields that don't necessarily exist in the physical world, but nonetheless have a big impact on our society, right? If you can hack into the internet systems and shut it down, can you imagine when all of our banking and everything is relied upon on the internet? That could be extremely, extremely a big vulnerability and a huge hit to a country to be able to attack that in the cyber battlefield, as well as the Space Force, which is also focused on satellites and things up in space as far as advanced reconnaissance and utilizing satellites for potentially offensive operations as well. So learning from how this war is played out is going to be very beneficial for us afterwards if we can figure out. And I'm hoping, we haven't. I don't know if we have special envoys there, people who are observing the war. They will never tell us if they do. But I hope we have some people down there that's been watching this to see exactly how Russia operates, and to a larger extent, what a modern battlefield looks like when it's peer on peer, right? Because we have not fought peer on peer or near peers, was what sometimes they'll call it in military jargon or military classes. They'll call a war with a near peer, and we haven't experienced that in a long, long time, right? Since World War II. We haven't experienced what war is like with that, right? With an actual country. We've been fighting mostly terrorists, guerrilla warfare, all of this other stuff. We just haven't been fighting people with advanced technology. We've been fighting, a bunch of, ragheads in the desert, or a bunch of people in the jungle, right? They don't have the technology that we've had. But what we do have, but when we watch what's going on in Ukraine, we see what it's like for an actual country like Russia, who again is not the most advanced. Don't get me wrong, but they do have the manpower. They do have the much more technology than any other person we have ever fought, and that goes towards China as well. So hopefully we are learning something from this war and seeing how it plays out. Drone warfare has been quite large in this one, which has changed the tactics of how they are because of all these hundreds and hundreds and thousands of drones, right? hundreds of thousands, not hundreds and thousands, hundreds of thousands of drones, and drone attacks from both sides has been a major player as far as the tactics on the ground. When you have constant drones in there who are able to drop anti-personnel bombs and things like that onto people, so it changes how a squad, for instance, moves around and how they have to space each other. It's been a very big effect on how the modern battlefield looks conventionally, right? And then the unconventional, not necessarily unconventional, but cyber warfare, right? And how that modern cyber battlefield looks like, and what we can do to try to combat that. So that's something I'm hoping that we're learning from this conflict. And that's what Donald Trump's talking about. He said when we talked about power plants, that was a long way around that. But it's been a huge point of contact for the Russia, and power plants have always been a major target militarily. Because again, you can shut people out. You want to take away that power. But what's been interesting in this war is seeing how they have been targeting it. Right. It's not just bomber aircraft, right? It's drones, it's cyber warfare, it's all these new things that is rapidly deployable. And our ideas, unfortunately, with America, in history, what we have found is that we've been a little bit behind the times when it comes to warfare, and it takes us a minute to catch up, and we catch up pretty quickly, and once we do catch up, we dominate. But World War II was a great example of that, especially in naval warfare. We were just behind the times. Hawaii was not prepped for an attack with aircraft. Hawaii was well defended, but it was defended expecting there was going to be some kind of naval fight to get it. Right? We had these massively long-range guns that could shoot miles out to against ships. But they take a long time to aim, and they're completely pointless and useless against aircraft. And the modern aircraft carrier, which was something we didn't really invest a lot in. We had a couple, but we didn't understand the importance of the aircraft carrier until we were forced to understand it after Pearl Harbor. And like I said, things like this is something we have to understand. Understand that, hey, it's not just going to be tanks. It's not going to be, as far as the Air Force is concerned, it's not going to just be, fighter jets. That's not where the battlefield is moving away from that kind of stuff and into drones and into cyber warfare. And like I said, to Donald Trump's credit, his first presidency, he was ahead of the times in that. And people made fun of him for the Space Force and things like that, but he was ahead of the time. He saw the future of the battlefield. Of course, you add bioweapons to that, right? Which something that China can be able to do with things like the Wuhan lab and understanding gain of function and all of these other things that they're doing, where you can have bioweapons and seeing how they can have a multifaceted approach in a modern battlefield, where you can attack people with cyber warfare, take out their communication networks, take out their basic life. Add to that, if you can start use a bioweapon like a pandemic to attack them. And we see how that shut down our country, right? And again, imagine if it was an actual serious virus, right? And how that could cripple us. And those two things before you even put a single bullet down a barrel, right? Think of how much damage could happen. So understanding the modern battlefield is something that I'm hoping our military is getting from what's happening in Ukraine. So like I said, Donald Trump said he would talk about the power plants and about land. So again, that's one of the major reasons why Russia ever invaded. Well, a couple reasons. One is they said that the Donetsk region on the far eastern side of Ukraine is full of a bunch of Russians, and they want to be a separate country, or they want to be part of Russia. The same kind of thing they had with Crimea. The truth of that, it's probably not much there, but that's something they maintained. Again, we know why they wanted Crimea is because they need a warm water port in Russia. Without Crimea, they don't have a warm water port. That would have been absolutely necessary for a country like that to have that. All their other ports, when I mean by warm water, is a port they can come in and out of 12 months out of the year. All their other ports in the other parts of Russia are in very cold regions, right? Arctic regions, where they can't deploy 12 months out of the year. So that's really the reason there. But the other major thing, of course, is buffer zone between them and other European countries. And their biggest fear was that Ukraine would join NATO. And of course, NATO has been growing and growing and growing. The problem with that is that from Russia's standpoint, it's like, hey, you have this alliance that's specifically designed to go against Russia. That's why NATO was founded. Was against the U.S. against the Soviet Union. You put that forward to Russia. That's why it exists, is to combat Russia. And now in a larger context, probably China, but really it's about European defense. So China is not really in there in the fact that unless China attacked us. And so that growingness, of course, makes Moscow a little nervous. But from our standpoint too, is like I talked about, they just don't put the money in, and that's why Europe doesn't have a chance to get a seat at this table for these negotiations. Because even though they've given just a little over 50%, if America drops out, they have nothing. Ukraine doesn't have any defense, and Russia and the rest of Europe does not have the money to be able to defend it. So that's why it's America that is making these decisions, because if we're not involved, then Ukraine falls. There's no doubt about it. And so that's why it's our opportunity to at least try to get something back from this. We've already spent so much money on it. Hopefully we can get something back out of it with the mineral rights that Donald Trump has talked about. And again, the mineral rights are not only good for us, but they're good for Ukraine, because that gives America some skin in the game, which is inherently a deterrent to Russia, and that's the huge benefit that Ukraine gets from that. But like I said, we'll see what they talk about if anything comes of it. It's pretty major, and it's just a phone call, right? This is not them meeting. This is not a formal sit down. This is not him coming to the White House. It's just a phone call, but we'll see exactly what they talk about. As like I said, Ukraine's already agreed with the United States. They're ready for a ceasefire. So we're getting into the final throes of this war, hopefully. And it's crazy how all it's really taken to end this thing is America moving forward to end it, and America engaging the parties to end it, which makes you wonder why the Biden administration never did that, right? Why they just let this thing go on for year after year after year after year, when we know America has had the power to end this thing, but they have refused to do it. And it makes you wonder why. And I would think, my guess would be the military-industrial complex and the money involved, right? And we know the illegal connections that the Bidens had with Ukraine as well. But regardless, this does show that this could have been ended years ago, and all of those billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that we have spent, have been completely down to waste. Hopefully it's not completely wasted, though, because this is the idea of Trump getting something back from Ukraine for us to go forward. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take our next break right here. When we get back, I want to talk about the Alien and Sedition Act, as well as deporting people down to Venezuela and what a judge had to say about that, and then what Trump had to say about that judge, or the Trump administration, not Trump himself, or what they're doing with that judge. It's a pretty great story. So if you want to call in during the break, number 601-879-0002. But keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103.9. And one of the other big campaign promises that Donald Trump has made is shutting down the illegal and dangerous cartels that have been coming up through our border and killing innocent people, as well as spreading the epidemic of fentanyl and other drugs, which has led to just record numbers of overdoses and has really, really harmed this country. I said, both in the drug trade as well as just dangerous people killing innocent people in our country. And of course, the first act that Donald Trump signed was the Laken Riley Act as part of that. And one of the big things, one of the big groups that Donald Trump has targeted has been to Argua. I can never say it right. Argua, I can never say it. But TDA is what we say. And one of the things that we've talked about in one of his plans was to take these people and instead of keeping them in American prisons, just deport them and give them back to El Salvador, right? It's actually a beautiful way to do it. Hey, these are not citizens, right? These people are not citizens. They're here most of the time, 99% of the time, illegally. And they are going to be held by the down there in Venezuela. We had a deal with not Venezuela, El Salvador. El Salvador's president down there to where we pay them a relatively nominal amount to take these dangerous people, and they get to go to this mega prison down there that is specifically designed to hold these very, very dangerous criminals. And they don't play around down there, right? They don't have the luxuries that our prisoners have up here, and these cartel members don't deserve that. And again, they're not citizens; they don't deserve due process here in the United States either. And that's where the Alien Sedition Act comes from. But we're going to talk about that in just a second in more detail. But a big part of that is, like I said, setting them down there. However, after a lawsuit by the ACLU, who always seems to be on the wrong side of most issues, they have a U.S. District Judge named James E. Boasberg issued an order on Saturday, temporarily blocking the deportation. That's right, he ruled on the favor of dangerous criminals. These guys will cut your freaking head off and not even think twice about it. They have no problem raping women. These are bad people. All right. It doesn't get much worse, honestly, they are just straight up warlords. There's no other way to put it. That's just what they are. It's how they handle business. And this U.S. District Judge, James E. Boasberg, ruled on their favor, and he issued an order Saturday temporarily blocking the deportations. However, unbeknownst to him, maybe, I don't know if it's unbeknownst to him or not, 2 planes were already in the air. And so we already sent a bunch of them already down there. And that had the liberals saying, oh, look at Donald Trump. He's flouting a judge's order. That judge's order is completely illegal. And honestly, like I said, it's about time we started testing the authority of these district judges. They just can't shut down the president of the United States who's been democratically elected with one little district judge. We're not talking about a Supreme Court here. We're talking about a district judge. And whether he has the authority to issue these to stop this whole thing is a little shaky. So White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, in a statement on Sunday, responded about the flouting court orders by saying the administration did not refuse to comply with the court order. The order, which had no lawful basis, was issued after terrorist TDA, that's that group I told you about, aliens had already been removed from U.S. territory. So in a court filing Sunday, the Department of Justice, which has appealed Boasberg's decision, said it would not use the Trump proclamation he blocked by further deportations if his decision is not overturned. So again, it's not like we're trying to flout the judge's order, but this judge's order is very concerning. Anyway, Marco Rubio had a great thing on CBS's Face the Nation this weekend, and I want to go ahead and play that for you guys. So let me get that going. And at the beginning of this, again, if you're on the live stream, you can kind of see some of the video of the prisons that we sent them down to, and they're great. They are, like I said, when I say they don't give they don't give any kind of leeway for these guys. So again, this deportation that you can see here on the screen, it included 2 leaders of the MS-13 gang and 21 of its most wanted, as well as 250 members of the TDA. And this is Marco Rubio on that.
We want to get rid of Trinidad gang members. They're terrorists too. The president designated them, asked me to designate, and I did, as a terrorist organization. We want to get rid of them as well. We don't want terrorists in America.
I just thought that was great, right? We don't want terrorists in America. And that's exactly what it is, right? That's who these people are. And that's why Donald Trump is using the Alien and Sedition Acts. So let's talk about that just a little bit here, on what that is and why Trump can use that to be able to skip a lot of the due process rights that these guys normally would get. And honestly, guys like this, again, who invade our country should not be getting any due process rights as far as I'm concerned, especially if we're going to get them out, right? That's one of the benefits of using this is that, if we prosecuted them in our courts, and sure, they get due process in our courts. I'm all for that 100%, right? I'm an attorney. I'm a criminal law attorney at that. I am 110% behind due process rights. But what I'm not for is for people who don't deserve them, or are people who are a danger to this country's safety and who are not from this country, okay? So again, what Donald Trump is using is called the Alien and Sedition Act. This is an act from 1798. Originally we passed it when the U.S. was preparing for what would be believed to be a war with France. So Congress passed a series of laws that increased the federal government's reach, and worried that immigrants could sympathize with the French. The Alien and Enemies Act was created to give the president wide powers to imprison and deport non-citizens in time of war. Since then, the act has been used 3 times: during the War of 1812, which was a war with Britain, World War I, and World War II. Now, during World War II, it was used quite extensively and in crazy amounts. Not just in this, in different parts of it. Were used to deport a lot of Germans and Japanese, specifically mostly Japanese being targeted. And we also used it to intern actual Japanese citizens, in which the Supreme Court ruled was constitutional. That was a Korematsu case. If you're a Supreme Court nerd, but that was actual citizens, and the Supreme Court ruled that they could just intern actual citizens in a time of war. So we're not talking about that, right? And that's how broad this. And I put that out there to show you how broad this law is. So we were able to do it during World War II to inter actual citizens and put them in little internment camps, and because of fears that they would turn on the United States. And we do have some evidence, right? For instance, we do know that in Pearl Harbor, for instance, Japanese citizens in Hawaii, and there's a lot of Japanese citizens in Hawaii, were actually taking pictures and doing surveillance of things like Wheeler Air Force Base and Pearl Harbor, Ford Island. They were doing surveillance photos of that and sending it back to Japan. So the fear wasn't necessarily unwarranted. Because it was there. But again, I'm not advocating for internment of citizens. What I'm saying is that this is how broad the Supreme Court has ruled this can go, right? And we're not using that, right? We're deporting, we're getting rid of actual non-citizens who are warlords. That's what we're using it for. And they're part of organizations that are more powerful than the militaries of the countries they are coming from in most times. So again, the American Civil Liberties Union and Democracy Forward, another liberal group, sued Trump in a federal court in Washington, D.C. And almost simultaneously, the Trump administration agreed to pay El Salvador $6 million to imprison about 300 members of the Tren de Aragua gang for 1 year. And again, that's a pretty good deal. 6 million for 300. That would cost us so much more than that, right? To house them here. So that's a pretty good deal. And that agreement with El Salvador followed discussions between the country's president, Nayib Bukele, and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio about housing migrants in El Salvador's notorious prisons that are designed specifically for these kinds of cartel members. And so, again, the key thing with the Alien Sedition Act is that the U.S. has to be at war. And Donald Trump, and as you heard Marco Rubio there talk about, is that they have designated these groups, MS-13, TDA, they have designated them as terrorist groups. And there's no way to put that, right? Because there has been a literal invasion of this country from the southern border. There is no other way to put it. With the hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people that have come up through the border, and they've come up, and a lot of them have come up with drugs and guns and human trafficking, drug trafficking, you name it. There is no more threat to this country than any other adversary that we have out there, right? Russia hasn't done that to us. China hasn't done that to us. They're also not great people. They're adversaries, but the direct impact has been from these cartels. And again, these are cartels that are more dangerous than and have more power than the countries they come from in a lot of cases, right? They have done more harm to this country than almost any other terrorist group that we've currently had designated as terrorist groups. We talk about what they've done to this country, the impact they have had on this country, and the invasion that has occurred. And so this follows what Donald Trump said in his inaugural address, when he said that he would direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions. And honestly, there's nothing else that you can say this. And this is an invasion that the last administration has implicitly allowed. And so I think this idea of this invasion from these criminal gangs, these terrorist groups, is exactly what the Alien Sedition Act is for. Right? It is exactly for that, to get these people out of here quickly. We don't need to prosecute them here, right? If we catch them, let's send them right back down. Let's send them to a big old prison where we know they're going to be thousands of miles away from here, and we know they're going to be kept safe down there because A, we're paying them, and people like Bukele, they like getting paid, and two, it is a tough prison. And they don't deserve any kind of our due process rights. They don't deserve the rights in our Constitution when they have come up here and specifically tried to have killed our citizens and have hurt our economy and our communities. You name it, they have been directly responsible for it. And so, like I said, the Aragua TDA, the Tren de Aragua, is just one of 7 other Latin American crime organizations that he's taught as foreign terrorist organizations. And so this is something that I think is a brilliant way. Again, this is always something Donald Trump's done, is thinking outside the box, and this is the best way to do it. These guys need to be out here as soon as possible. And this judge who's ruled in their favor, that's soon going to be overturned. And I don't know how you could ever rule in someone's favor, these people who are a danger to this country. All right, we're going to take our last break right here. We'll get back. We'll do This Day in History. Keep it tuned to the full story on WYB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the Full Story in WYB 103.9. I want to get to this day in history real quick. So on this day, March 17th, 1861, the Kingdom of Italy was established. So for centuries, Italy was not a single country, but a collection of independent states, many under the control of foreign powers like Austria, France, and Spain. However, the dream of united Italy, known as Risorgimento, had been alive for decades, but that turning point turned into reality took wars, diplomacy, and revolutionary leadership, mainly from Giuseppe Garibaldi, who was a fiery general whose Red Shirts army conquered southern Italy, Count Camillo de Cavour, the brilliant strategist who negotiated alliances and military victories, sort of like the John Adams of Italy, really, as well as Giuseppe Mazzini. So in 1861, their efforts paid off, and on March 17th, Victor Emmanuel II, King of Sardinia, was declared the King of Italy. Venice would eventually join in 1866, and then Rome, which was still under papal control, remained independent until 1870 when Italian forces took it there. There's actually a great museum on this whole history in Torino, which was the first capital of the Kingdom of Italy, which eventually moved to Florence and then Rome once they took care of that. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. We'll see you again tomorrow, but until then, my name is Matthew Bishop, and you've heard the full story.